Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tales from the Fandom. It is hopefully the month of April by the time this episode gets released, as we are coming back from a almost three-month break here. But I am joined by one of my guests that I recorded with almost 3 years ago, and she has agreed to come back after a number of traveling all over the place and doing things, and just everything has changed from our time that we talked together. Her episode was originally episode 25, released back in October of 2016, I believe. And I am joined by Caitlin, who is, you might know on Twitter or Instagram as ATheatrephile. Caitlin, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. Those were the days of where I would have like 12 to 15 episodes already recorded and ready to be released. And as we talked before, I've had this break of almost 3 months where I just didn't record and didn't do podcasting and just took a step back. But you're my first person to come back from this break, and I'm happy it was you.
Well, I'm honored to be the first one back. But yeah, it's funny. We were talking briefly before we started recording, but I actually just listened to our episode, the first one that we recorded like a month ago. Just randomly, I wanted to go back and listen to it again, and I was struck by just how much has changed since then, specifically in my life. And then I was thinking, it would be really cool to kind of revisit some of that. And then 2 weeks later or so, you reached out and asked me to come back. So it was a bit of kismet there.
Absolutely.
But I'm very excited to be back.
I was looking at what we talked about, and I'm gonna run through the list of things.
Sure.
We talked about Harry Potter. We talked about Cursed Child, which hadn't come out yet.
Yep.
But by the time I released the podcast, it was out.
Mm-hmm.
Pokemon and Pokemon Go, which coincidentally had also just been released, and how that has 3 years later. We talked, I think, a little bit about Glee, and that is actually coming up on its 10-year anniversary, shockingly enough.
Oh my God.
And we also talked about cosplay.
Yes.
And then immediately after we talked, I believe you relocated from the West Coast to New York, right?
I did. So when we recorded the first podcast, I had just I just finished grad school. And I didn't have a job yet. So I was just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. And then shortly after, it was after we recorded, but before it aired. By the time it aired, I was already in New York. But I was actually at San Diego Comic-Con in cosplay when I got the call that I had gotten a job in New York. So I packed up and moved to New York City and spent about 2 years there working for an off-Broadway theater company as their marketing manager. Which was a lot of things. New York was a lot of things, which we can get into. And then about 6 months ago, I moved back to the West Coast. I'm up in the Bay Area now, again, for another job. And also just because I wanted to leave New York. And so I've been out here for about 6 months. And yeah.
What was it like for you being in New York for the 2-year period?
New York is hard. It is a lot. There's some things that I really, really loved about New York City. I mean, I'm a theater kid. That's what I was doing for a living. So there really isn't a better place to be in that sense. I was working in theater. I was surrounded by theater. I was seeing theater 3-4 nights a week. So that was really exciting, but it's a lot. That city is expensive and busy, and there's not a lot of really downtime, just like inherent in that lifestyle. And I was working a lot. The job that I had, which I absolutely adored, but I was working probably close to 50 hours a week most of the time. So I was doing a lot of things, and I was very, very busy all the time. And it just and I don't do winter. I have learned this having now, because I grew up in Texas and then I moved to Southern California. So I'd never experienced winter really before. And I was not a fan. Uh, I am still not a fan. So, it was a great couple of years. It's something that I'm really glad that I did, but it got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm done here. I need to be back on the West Coast now.
Yeah, we had my wife decided to do travel nursing when like right after we got married. This was back in 2007, and we went to New York for I think is about 6 months.
Okay.
And I've been all over. I lived in Canada. I was mostly since middle school Florida.
Hmm.
I like New York for certain things, but dang if certain things are just so crazy expensive. I remember going into a store, like a grocery store, and it's like, here's a box of cereal. This box of cereal is $10.
Yeah. There's the cost of living there is a little absurd.
Yeah. On the other hand, it was nice to have, public transportation. Um, you have all these great food places to go to, and we didn't do much of the Broadway stuff just because of time and money,
Right.
but we did enough to where it's like, okay, that's cool. We'd like to go back, and I always told my wife, I'd love to go back and visit, but
Mm.
not really to live there.
Yeah, that's that. I actually was just there earlier this month at the very beginning of April, because my mom and I, back when I was still living there, had the opportunity to buy Hamilton tickets at a price that was not obscene.
Hmm.
Um, which I have been obsessed with Hamilton for close to 4 years now, and I entered the lottery every single week that I lived in New York. I was constantly trying to find tickets. I had a bunch of like friend of a friend of a friend who had connections, and I kept trying to figure out a way, and it just never worked out. So my mom and I finally got a chance to get these tickets, and she's like, "I'll get these for you, as a much belated birthday present." And I was like, okay, great. Yeah, cool. And I remember her saying to me, because at this point I'd already been talking about how I wanted to move back to California. And she said, well, what are you going to do if we buy these tickets and then you move? And I was like, well, we'll fly back to New York because Hamilton is worth it. So then a couple of months later, I got the job in Oakland and found out I was moving to the Bay Area. And so, last month I took a long weekend and took a few days off work and flew back to New York. And it was great. It was, there are things that are kind of nostalgic and familiar. Um, taking the subway was fun for 5 seconds, and then I remembered how much I hate the subway. But getting to see some of my friends, getting to see, places that I'd been. I went to go visit my old job and see everybody, and that was really cool. And seeing a couple of shows was great. Hamilton was incredible, of course. But it really just cemented that idea that, like, I would love to come back and visit every, maybe once a year, once every other year. I
Mhm.
don't ever feel the need to live here ever again.
Absolutely. And Hamilton just came through Orlando a couple months ago. It crashed the server to get
Yep.
tickets. And then when you did get in line, it was like you are like you have a 7-hour wait. And it's like
Yep.
what? And yeah, by the time it got to where I could try and get tickets, everything was sold out. I was like, okay, maybe another time.
Yeah. I actually just had a similar experience here. So Hamilton is actually here right now, which was funny because everyone's like, "Why are you flying to New York to see it? It's here. It's in San Francisco." I was like, "I already have tickets. It's fine." But I just got tickets to see Cursed Child when it starts in San Francisco, which is
Awesome.
funny because we were talking about that the first time I was on the podcast 3 years ago. My friend and I at the time, now my boyfriend, but at the time, my friend and I, had just gotten tickets to see it in London, and then realized we weren't going to be able to go. And I
Right?
think we recorded the podcast like the week I would have had to be in London to see it. And so that was another one where we gave up those tickets. And then when I was in New York after it opened there, I was trying to get tickets like constantly and kept getting shut out. And so finally, when they announced the tickets were going to go on sale for San Francisco, I, got online and I sat in the queue for like 5 hours and I got us tickets. In January 2020, because it doesn't even open until like October, but January 2020, I will be finally seeing Cursed Child as well. And and the funny thing is I'll be seeing it with the person that I originally bought the tickets with, 3 years ago. So fun kind of universe moment.
Oh yeah, and I remember we had talked about it because you had said that you were going to go see it, and then obviously like just things came up, and when they brought it to New York, I told my wife, I was like, I'm gonna try and get tickets, and she's like, what do you mean you're gonna try and get tickets? What do you think you're gonna do? Fly up there? I was like, yes, we will
Mhm.
fly up there if I just happen to get tickets, but that is not the case.
No. So I'll finally be seeing that next year, but
But but now you're back West Coast
yes. Yes.
doing more stuff on that side. But one of the things that we were talking about before we got started, and if people have been listening from episode 25 and following you on either Instagram or on Twitter, is that a lot of things have changed for you on one of the major fronts, which was cosplay.
That is true. When we recorded last time, I was still very, very active as a cosplayer. Um, and that shifted really in conjunction with the move to New York. I took a little bit of a hiatus, what was supposed to be a hiatus when I first moved, just because I was like, okay, I'm moving. I have to figure out, kind of how everything works and get everything settled. And then I never really found my footing again. There were a couple of things that made it harder to be as active as I was when I was living in New York. One of them being there weren't as many conventions. In Southern California, especially during quote unquote convention season, there's a convention every weekend for
Hmm.
like a 6 month period. And most of them are teeny tiny, but there are opportunities to constantly be out there and booking shoots and, generating content, which is the biggest thing when you're running a cosplay Instagram, is you constantly have to have new photos to post. That wasn't really the case in New York. There's New York Comic Con, which is huge, but which I had just missed by the time I moved, or I'd missed the chance to get tickets anyway. And then there's a couple other smaller cons. There's WinterCon, there's Big Apple Con, which I went to, but they're much smaller. They're much more out of the way. There aren't really a lot of like big like conventions that are tied to open space. There are a lot of, parks and that kind of thing in New York City, but the conventions weren't really making use of them or weren't really in locations that lent themselves to good photo shoots.
Hmm.
So that was a hardship, is that there weren't as many opportunities. I also didn't know any photographers. That was the other thing that made it really easy when I was in LA, is that I had the chance really early on to connect with a bunch of photographers and make friends. And so there were constantly people that I could call up and be like, hey, do you want to shoot? That wasn't the case in New York. I didn't know any of the photographers. I went to a couple of the kind of smaller conventions and made a few like kind of connections. I got a few photos, but nothing really stuck. There was one photographer that I did kind of connect with, and then we did an outside con shoot. We did a shoot at my apartment that nothing bad happened, but the vibes were weird enough that I wasn't really willing to continue shooting with that person.
Hmm.
Just, nothing, Me Too esque, but just it was off. Things were a little off. So the one photographer that I did, kind of make a business connection with was not someone I was willing to continue shooting with. So I didn't have any photographers to, generate content with, any professional photographers anyway. I had some, friends that we'd do cosplay stuff and take like pictures of each other, but it wasn't really the same as generating professional content. And I didn't have the space or the time, which you have to have both of those things to really be generating a lot of cosplay. And I was living my first apartment in New York. I had 2 roommates. My second apartment in New York, I had 4 roommates. So there wasn't a lot of space to really kind of spread out and have like a crafting area. And I was working a lot. I was seeing a lot of theater. I was going out with friends. I didn't have a lot of time to devote to it. So it kind of just naturally declined a bit. And it really came more into like, okay, I have a big convention coming up in the summer I'm going to make a costume for that. Like for I did manage to do, I made my Anna dress. My Anna from Frozen was my big kind of first year project, which I'm still incredibly proud of. But that was okay, I'm flying back for San Diego Comic-Con. I'm going to make this costume for that, and that was kind of the one costume I made that year.
Mm-hmm.
And then this last year I had started working on a costume for New York Comic-Con that was Keyleth from Critical Role, which I imagine we'll probably talk about more in a second. But that was something where I was like, okay, I'll have this done for New York Comic-Con. And then I ended up moving literally the day after New York Comic-Con. Like the movers came the next day.
Holy cow.
So that costume, which was supposed to take about a month and a half to do, I ended up doing in like 2 weeks so that I could then, have some time to pack and get ready to move, which was great because it meant I actually ended up wearing it to a Ren Fair in addition to wearing it to the con. But so those were really the two, in a 2-year span, those were really the only two costumes that I really worked on in any kind of major capacity, just because I didn't have the bandwidth or the real estate to make them happen. That said, the one thing I will say about that too is that when I got to New York, it started to get stressful. There was this idea that like I have to get content, I have to make these connections, I have to do this, I have to, and it started to feel more like an obligation and less like fun. So there was one point where I reached out to the person that I consider to be my cosplay fairy godmother, who is Ashley Weasley Cosplay, who's the person that got me into cosplay in the first place. And I told her, I was like, this doesn't feel like fun anymore. I'm not, like, it feels like something I have to do. And she kind of helped me talk myself into letting myself have a break
Mm-hmm.
and, doing a cosplay because I thought it was going to be fun and I really wanted to build something and not because I felt like I had to. So it's not something that I'm not doing at all, but it's something that's definitely it's gone back to being more of a hobby and less of something that I'm trying to, monetize or really do consistently. But, still something that's fun for every now and then. I do have something in mind for San Diego Comic-Con this July, which I will be attending. We'll see if I get it done in time.
Listen, I totally understand because for people that have listened to the podcast, obviously there's been a huge chunk of time where I took off from February to whenever this episode gets released, which hopefully will be on Monday in April. But I was just so incredibly burned out. I had a major project in 2018 that took up, I would say, 5 months of my life between like recording episodes and editing them so they'd all be ready to be released. Like I think I released 30 or 40 episodes in the month of June
Oh,
um,
wow.
for a project that I did. Um, along with like blog posts and all sorts of stuff that just had to be scheduled and edited. And like even like after that happened, it took time to even just recover. And I still had content and I was doing it, but then at a certain point I was just like, I can't.
Hmm.
I can't sit in front of this mic. I can't, give the attention that the people deserve that I'd really love to talk to. And it's like I just needed the break. And now it's like, okay, brain, I think we're back to sync and working relatively well together. Let's try it again.
Hmm.
That and my wife was like, you've dedicated a lot of time to this and money. You might as well keep going.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, the great thing about, the way that the internet has kind of allowed creative projects to become something that people can do for a living, especially with things like, Patreon and coffee and that kind of stuff, is that it's allowed people to take something they're passionate about and make it a full-time career. But at the same time, there is this, or even not a full-time career, but something that, takes a lot of time and is something you can get a return on, but is then balancing this kind of sense of not losing the passion of it because it becomes an obligation, or because, people are expecting certain things, or that kind of thing. There's another cosplayer that I have been following for a little while now, that I really enjoy her content, and that's Ginny D.
Hmm.
And she cosplays full time. She's a full time, creator, and she's put out a lot of really great content about what that means and about what it takes to take something that is a creative passion and make it a full-time career, and the
Hmm.
reality of how much time that takes, and the instability of that. So when I have, people talking about, were you ever professional as a cosplayer? And I will say, like, usually I'll say I was semi-professional back then. I wasn't making a living off of it, but I was, occasionally making money and booking shoots and that kind of thing. But I point to her content a lot in her videos about what that really means to actually commit to doing that full time, and the joys and the pitfalls of that. It's a balance. It's a really hard balance to try to avoid that burnout. And I think that's one of the reasons I pulled back when I did, is because I could feel myself getting to that point,
Hmm.
where I was like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. And I didn't want that to become permanent, because I do love cosplay. I love making costumes. I love wearing costumes. And I wanted to keep the joy of it and not have that get ruined by, pushing myself too hard. So it's all a balance.
It is. And while you were taking your cosplay hiatus or cosplay break, I noticed one of the photos that you posted. I think I might have even sent you a message after seeing it, because it was a picture of a Dungeons and Dragons character sheet and some dice. And I was like, but because that is one of the things that has been catching me off guard from when I started the podcast and recording with, and I don't want to say like primarily cosplayers, but it's been where all of a sudden I'm like, what, you role play too? Like,
Yeah.
where did this come from? You sent me a list of things that you like to do, and Dungeons and Dragons or role playing wasn't on there, and I'm like,
Mhm.
it's like, but that is one of the things where I was like, Caitlin's role playing. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
It's interesting that, I mean, there has been a massive, not resurgence, I'd say, but a massive kind of growth of the tabletop role play D&D community in the last, 5-6 years, I'd say, for a couple of reasons. I actually, my first experience with D&D was in college, which was at this point 10-ish years ago. Yeah, 9 or 10 years ago, when I was in college for 4 years, but when I first started playing tabletop games was about 10 years ago now. And there was one summer where I was home from college, and one of my friends, had was in a group. They weren't actually playing D&D, they were playing Mage the Awakening, which is a White Wolf system.
Love
But
it.
they said, "Hey, do you want to come check this out?" And then I ended up joining the group, and we played all summer. We'd meet up for, 12-hour sessions and just play all day long. And I really, really liked it. It was really fun. I mean, my background before I went into arts marketing was in acting, so that kind of creative outlet. It's not acting necessarily, but it's that same kind of feel, this like embodying a character. And so that was a really nice way for me to kind of get that, that acting itch
Hmm.
in a time when I wasn't doing a lot of performing. But so I had a really great time doing it. And then I didn't do it again for a really long time. I did a couple of one shots other times in college. I had a couple of friends in grad school. We were, they'd try to start up campaigns and they'd kind of fizzle a little bit. But it was always something that I was like, oh, yeah, no, that was really fun. And then Critical Role happened. Or, well, Critical Role had already been happening, but I discovered it. So when I last March, so I guess a little over a year ago now, I went to Japan. I had a friend, or have a friend, who works at Tokyo Disneyland, and she said, "Hey, you should come over and see me, and see me perform and be in Tokyo." And I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll be on a, I'll be in." I don't think she expected me to take quite as immediate advantage of it as I did, but I was like, "Yeah, sure, no, I'll be there, and I'll be there next month." It's fine. So I went to Tokyo for a week, which was incredible. But I was, thinking about, like, okay, I'm gonna have a really, really long plane flight, and I don't sleep on planes ever. So I was like, okay, I have a lot of time. I don't want to pay for internet, so I'm gonna have to like download something to do. And I remembered people talking about Critical Role, which is a D&D live stream / podcast, depending on how you choose to consume it. And I was like, okay, well, I liked D&D stuff. I'll check this out. And I downloaded the first, 4 or 5 episodes, just so I'd have something to listen to on the plane. And then I was completely obsessed. um, so I started watching the show live. I started with, listening to their first campaign, which had, I believe, already ended when I started watching, or was about to. I don't remember exactly the timeline, but I started at the beginning of it. And then when they started their second campaign, no, they had already started second campaign. So first campaign was done, and then I caught up to the second campaign and started watching it live. And then slowly made my way through watching all of the first campaign as well, which is something like, I don't know, 500 hours of content or something. It's absurd. But I just fell completely in love with this show just because, I mean, a lot of reasons. I did already enjoy D&D, but just the cast is so authentic and sincere and wonderful, and the characters are fantastic, and the story is amazing, and just like, I could go on and on and on. And it really reignited some creativity for me, I'd say. And I say that a lot, actually, especially on Twitter, where half of my Twitter is just D&D these days. Is that it really kind of reignited that creative spark. That's actually, I hadn't made a cosplay in almost a year. And then as soon as I started listening to the show, I was like, I have to cosplay Keyleth. I have to do Keyleth. She is my favorite character. There's a lot of things about her as a character that I respond really strongly to in my own personal life. So I was like, I have to do this character. And she was a redhead, so I didn't even have to wear a wig. It was great. And I'm just like completely enamored with Marisha Ray, who plays her on the show, or played her, past tense, on the show. It got me back into cosplay in that sense. Is I think I actually made the entire costume in like a 2-week period. I just sat down and just did it. And then the other thing that it did was convince me to like, oh yeah, I really liked this. Yeah, I really liked playing D&D. I should, get back into that. And then that just kind of snowballed. I joined a campaign in New York. I was with them for about 3 or 4 months, maybe. And then, found out I was moving, and we killed my character off in spectacular fashion. And then when I got to the Bay Area, I knew very few people. I had a couple of friends here and there, and then, my boyfriend is here, but I didn't know, a lot of other people in the area. And I was like, you know what, I bet I could find a D&D campaign, and that would be a way to kind of make some friends. And I am now in 2 campaigns at the same time. And it's been great. It's really fun it's a fun way to interact with people. It's a fun way to get to know people in a way that there isn't a lot of pressure, because you're all kind of playing characters. So you do get to know the people that you're playing with, but you don't all have to sit down and be like, okay, so we're going to be friends now. Which, as someone with social anxiety, is perfect, because I can like get to know everyone in a way that's kind of like, no expectations, no rule. I mean, there are rules about the game, but there's not. It's just an easier way to kind of have that first step of interaction when there's like already a parameter within that you are within what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, I started off. I mean, I always joke that D&D is one of the easiest and cheapest hobbies to get into, that then becomes one of the most expensive if you let it. Because you really don't need anything. You need a pen, and you need or like a pencil and a pen, and like a set of dice. And now they have dice rolling apps for your phone, so you don't even really need dice. But then once you decide to start investing in stuff, like I have a dice tray that is more money than I care to admit, because Wormwood dice trays are very pretty.
Yep.
And I have the largest dice hoard this side of Laura Bailey, who's another character actress on Critical Role. I can't stop buying dice because there's so many pretty ones, and I want them all, and it's a problem. But yeah, it's a really fun, creative way to interact with other people and tell stories. And yeah, it's something that I'm really, really glad that I got back into. And I have a lot of that. I put the credit at the feet of Critical Role for reminding me, like, oh, right, this is this really cool thing that I used to really like doing. I should see if there's other people doing that around here. And of course there were.
Lo and behold, it is still there.
It is. And it's gotten
Waiting for you.
even more popular now than, I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you had the Satanic Panic and nobody wanted to talk about it. And then even in the 90s, like early thousands, it was, people were playing. There've always been people playing, but it wasn't something that was necessarily in the public eye in a positive way.
Yep.
And then now, with especially with the rise of social media and kind of those nerd spaces online, it's something that's popular and public. There's a lot of stories right now about people incorporating D&D into educational opportunities, running after school clubs for kids, or using it as ways to teach social skills and cooperation and that kind of thing. I mean, the Critical Role Kickstarter just raised like $11 million. Like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's mainstream, but it's not niche anymore. It really is something that, the public knows about and can get into, which I think is awesome.
Oh, definitely. That is one of the things where I've definitely seen that growth. Um, Now, I will say up front, I've not listened to Critical Role.
Mhm.
It's just a lot of content, and
Yep.
at this point, I can't find the time to even listen to the things that I generally listen to.
Right. It's
But
it's a lot to take in. There's a
oh,
lot
and
of content.
there's just so much
Mhm.
because I've recorded with people that do streams or do like their podcasts for D&D or role playing. It's I'd love to keep listening to them, but I don't have a commute anymore. So
Right.
I'm at home, or I have the kids, and now the kids are old enough that they are playing Dungeons and Dragons, and each of them has their own mini. And in fact, I ordered my middle son's mini from from someone on Twitter who I found, and I was like, I need a mini for my son because I can't find any other mini makers had done the paint job that for that specific character that he's doing. I'm like, I'm going to order him his
Mhm.
mini. Now we'll have a full set of minis for the family, and they each have their own dice and dice bag, and for Christmas, like my daughter plays a druid, so I bought her the druid cards, spell cards, so that
Oh,
way
that's so awesome.
she'd have them and not have to look at like a piece of paper. She'd have like cards that show her like what her spells are. And
Yeah.
but yeah, like, and just I have to go back to when you said that you played Mage, because that was one of my favorite White Wolf games of all time. And it's definitely a game that challenges you to think way outside of the box
Oh, yeah.
versus like vampire or werewolf, where it's kind of more straight up. Mage is the one where you have to like, okay, I'm going to do this to do this to do this, but to do it in the way where I'm not going to get like that magical backlash
Mm.
to like hurt myself when I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's such a fun game. And we just this is like 1 year since we bought our house, and my role playing books had been packed away in boxes for 7 years, and I actually have them displayed. I'm looking at them right now. And I realized when we moved 7 years ago back to Florida, I sold off like a huge part of my collection, and I really want it back.
Oh, no.
But so for now, you are you in just straight up fifth edition D&D games?
Yeah, I'm in. Well, yes. One of them is, well, it's not actual Adventurers League. It's Adventurers League legal, whatever that mean. I mean, it means we're
Okay.
playing by like the treasure point rules and all that, which I hate. I hate them so much. Um, but it's not like a drop-in game the way most Adventurers League is. It's like the same people every week. We're playing through a module,
Right.
which is something that was very new to me. Every game I'd ever played had been homebrew.
Hmm.
I'd never played through like a written module before, and it's been fun, and the group is really good. But it's kind of cementing for me that, like, okay, no, homebrew is really I prefer that over the published modules.
Right.
And the other campaign I'm in is homebrew, and it's like completely world built. Our DM is like absurd with the amount of detail she's put into everything. So it's been really cool. We've only had about, I want to say, 3 or 4 sessions, because there was a period when we first started, where we were only meeting once a month, because none of our schedules lined up. So we're getting up to a place where we're meeting, every other week or so, but it's been really fun, and there's a lot of kind of cool backstory stuff that, is starting to kind of filter out. So it's great.
So
I'm really excited.
I gotta ask, what are some of your like favorite classes or races to play? Because that's always fun to find out. Like, oh, this person really loves something like way completely different than what I expected them to be.
I don't know. For me, I don't know so much about like a favorite class because I tend to have like favorite characters.
Okay.
Because again, there's like that acting background, so it's all like, okay, well, what's gonna have the most like fulfilling character arc or whatever, which again also is really dependent on kind of where the DM takes things, which is another reason I'm really excited about this homebrew game is that our DM is doing a really great job of like actually incorporating things about our backstory into what's been going on. My first bunch of games, not some, I mean, I don't even remember what I did in the mage game in college, but most of the one shots I usually just took cleric because somebody had to. I'm not so much a fan of that, but you know, it's like, oh, I'll do it if I need to. The game in New York, I was playing a ranger, which was fun, but mechanically probably not something I'd want to do again real soon. Right now, I'm playing a rogue in the module game, which is fun. Rogues can do a lot of damage really quickly, which is great. And then the homebrew game, I'm playing a warlock, and I adore her as a character. Like, I won't give away too much in case anyone who's in my game happens to listen, but she doesn't really know what her patron is. She's still kind of figuring out what powers she has. Like, it's very much this kind of like, what did I actually make this deal with kind of an art. And then she's got, this larger quest that she's going on as well, like the reason why she made this deal and took off. But it's been a lot of fun, and I really actually like, in terms of the casting classes, I really like the warlock mechanics. The fact that all of your spells are at a certain level and you don't have to worry about like, I have this many of this level spell slot and I have this many of this level spell slot. It's like, oh, okay, you're fourth level, all of your spells are level 2. Just there you go. And the fact that you get your spells back after a short rest instead of a long one makes me happy.
Yeah, that is the one thing I stay away from is like the spell casting classes. Like I'll play cleric, but my brain does not work with like how many spells do I get and how many spell slots and how many times like no, I'm good. Someone
That's
else
one of
can
the
do that.
reasons why I originally picked warlock, is because it's a little simplified in that way, is that it's like, okay, you have, because like right now we're only, I think, level 3. Yeah. So I only have 2 spell slots right now, but they're both level 2. So no matter what I cast, I'm casting it at level 2 and I only have 2 slots, and then I just have to like sit there for an hour before I can get them back. But as opposed to like a wizard where you've got like 5 level 1 slots and 5 level 2 slots and 2 level 3, or a sorcerer where they're doing meta magic and that's just all kinds of weird. Like warlock, I feel like, because I'd never played a spellcaster really either. I mean, cleric kind of, but I mostly played like martial clerics more than anything else.
Right.
So warlock felt like kind of the easiest introduction into playing a caster class, and then the flavor aspect of it in terms of the narrative, in terms of what her story arc was, worked really, really well. So I'm really enjoying that so far. I really hope she doesn't die. My rogue, I kind of wouldn't really care that much. Like, I'd be like, oh, that's a bummer, but I wouldn't really care if she died. If my warlock dies, I'm going to be really upset.
Right. So now you got the 2 games going on. You're a Critical Role devotee.
Yep.
Which thankfully for Critical Role, and I guess now that you're back on the West Coast, do you have more space for cosplaying again?
I do. I actually have a little like table desk thing set up in my bedroom where I've got my sewing machine all set up and I've got all my supplies and stuff. I've done a couple of projects. None of them have actually been cosplay specific. I've actually been making like actual things. But I do, there's a cosplay that it's funny because it's been on my list since like 2015. Like I found an image I posted of like, I'm thinking about making some of these cosplays from like fall of 2015, and this one was on there. And I kept being like, I'm gonna make it. Actually, when I was in New York, I bought a bunch of fabric for it and then got scared and didn't touch it because I was like, I'm gonna mess this up. But I've decided, and I'm gonna say it now so that I'm held accountable and I have to make it. Did you ever play the Fable games? I may have actually brought this up in the last episode. I don't even remember.
I don't think no, I've never played Fable games.
Okay. there's a character in the Fable series called Teresa, who's like a blind prophetess. I'm pretty sure, actually, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure I mentioned 3 years ago in our last podcast that I was planning to make this costume. But she's a kind of a guide-esque character. She shows up occasionally and says vaguely, like prophetic things about how you're becoming a hero and whatnot. But she has a really cool costume, and she's a really integral character in terms of the overall series. So I've been saying for years that I was going to make this costume and then not doing it because it is very complicated and I hadn't quite figured out how I wanted to do it, or like if I had the skills to do it properly. So I've decided that I'm going to do it and wear it for San Diego Comic-Con in July. I still have not started it. It's still sitting over there. The way that I decided I was going to make it, I looked at it again and I was like, there is no way this construction is going to hold. So I have to kind of start over. Fortunately, I haven't touched the fabric, so I can do, whatever I want with it. But that's the next big thing, is me finally tackling this costume that I've been saying I was going to do for years. So we'll see how that goes. And then pulling out a few of the. I mean, I haven't worn any of my costumes in a while. I haven't done anything since I moved, but so I'll pull out a couple of those as well, probably for July.
Now, I do want to say, and for people that are listening, definitely if you check out Caitlin's Instagram, scroll back a little bit to get the cosplay pictures. But what struck me is, because as of today, there's been 2 episodes of Game of Thrones,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to say that your Sansa still is like on point as far as just the costume and your look and everything. It like when I see it, and then I went back, I was like, oh yeah, let me look, because I remembered that you had done the costume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of views in the last couple weeks out of reposting the old Sansa pictures. Yeah, that was actually the first costume I made completely from scratch. And I mean, I had a pattern and stuff, but that was the first one where I like made the entire outfit, just like buying fabric and sewing it. And so there are things about it that make it difficult to wear. The sleeves aren't quite on right, so I can't really lift my arms, that kind of thing. But it's that was one that I was like, I really like this dress and I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. And then I made something that actually kind of worked. So I was really proud of that one. I'm really proud of that one. And Sansa's just the best character on Game of Thrones. So there's that. I will fight anyone who says otherwise.
I do want to ask, before we start wrapping things up, I want to just touch on a few of the things from the way back time.
Yeah.
Well, number one, how was Cursed Child?
Well, I haven't actually seen it yet.
Oh, that's right. Dang it. Okay, I'm going to.
I've read the script. Obviously, I read the script.
Okay.
Really soon after we recorded, actually, and I wasn't impressed with the script, as most people weren't.
Right.
But one of the things that I kind of kept reminding people, because when I was in New York, one of the ways that I decided to make friends when I was there is that I joined a Harry Potter meetup group, because the New York City has the largest, I think, Harry Potter fan club. Oh God, what did we used to say? Either in the country or the world. I don't really remember. The organizer John is gonna like kill me for not remembering what the actual line is, but it's a huge group of people. And I was really active with them. But one of the things that when Cursed Child would come up, everyone would be like, ugh. And I'd be like, well, yes, ugh. But the other thing that I kind of had a little bit more perspective on as a, theater human is that like plays aren't written to be read. So reading the script, I was like, okay, this is like what is going on here. But, as I started kind of thinking about like what this would actually look like on a stage, I was kind of like, okay, I can see how some of this that's coming off really cheesy and stupid on a script is actually going to work live. And that was the people that I knew that actually had gone to see the show. That was what most of them said, is like, I didn't think the script was any good, but then it worked on stage. So I'm really excited to see it and kind of see, well, for one thing, apparently the staging and the magic is unreal, but I'm excited to see what it's actually like on a stage as opposed to on the page, as you might say.
Exactly. And that's the one thing I've heard too from people that have gone to see it is they say that it definitely works a lot better as you seeing it live versus you reading the script and being
Right.
like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Okay. And are you into the Fantastic Beasts series at all?
Casually. Like I've seen them, they're fine. I'm not, super obsessed with them the way that I was with the original Harry Potter series. I'm interested to see where they take it. I like that they're going kind of a much darker route and that they're allowing some of their hero characters to go a little dark as well. So that's been fun to kind of watch, but I'm, I'll watch them. I'll enjoy them, but I'm not like, super obsessed with them or anything.
Mhm.
It's not an end game situation. God, I am so not. I'm seeing it Thursday night, and I am so not ready.
My original plan for Endgame was to see it after opening weekend, but the internet is mean
Yep.
and people are garbage with spoilers.
Yep.
So I figured out that it's okay, 3 hours, and they have a Friday morning showing at 10,
There you
and
go.
the kids are in school, so I can go see it by myself.
Yeah, it's funny. My boyfriend's actually out of town this weekend, and I like sat down and I was like, "We need to talk. We either need to see Endgame on Thursday night, or I'm seeing it without you." And he was like, "Well, yeah, if we didn't see it, I'd go see it when I was home with my family anyway." And I was like, "Okay, that's that. And if we need to do that, that's fine. But I just need you to know, I'm not waiting for you.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not risking getting spoiled until you get back in town." So we're seeing it Thursday night, which will be
Awesome.
great. Yeah.
All right. And another of the topics that we covered was Pokemon. Are you still into Pokemon? Are you looking forward to the new games that are coming out this year? What is your uh, Pokemon level, I guess?
I am still into it. I do not have a Nintendo Switch, but I'm considering purchasing one so that I can play the new games that are coming out. It's still something that, I do casually. I still have Pokemon Go on my phone. I'm not playing it as much as I was when it first came out, obviously, but I take the bus to work and I have like a 10-minute walk to the bus stop, so I'll pull it out, occasionally and see what's up there and, catch anything that's around. So
Hmm.
it's something that I'm still into. I'm not playing it as actively as I was just because nobody really is. But I still open it occasionally to see what's around.
Okay. Are you now that you're getting back into the cosplay groove? Are you going to cosplay as one of the starters?
Um, Probably not. I did that with Rowlet when that kind of generation came out, and it was fun, and I really liked making that costume, but it had such a limited shelf life. A couple of months after they announced the starters, nobody cared, including me. um, and so that's actually, I don't think I ever wore that costume again after the convention that I wore it at initially, which was Long Beach either Comic Con or Comic Expo. I forget which one. But I never really had the occasion to wear it again because nobody would have known what it was. It was just like, okay, you're in a skirt with like green hood. What is this? So I probably won't do the starters just because it's a lot of time and money to invest in something that's not going to, have any kind of longevity in terms of rewear appeal. I tend to pick costumes that I'm going to want to wear more than once, just because
Hmm.
it takes me a lot of time and effort to make them, and I don't have the resources to be doing that a lot with one-off costumes.
Exactly. And I imagine you still have your Misty though.
I do still have Misty. I still have Sansa. I don't have Black Widow anymore because it fell apart. Uh, all of the accessories fell apart because they were made with hot glue. Because that was the first costume I ever made after Misty. Um, I still have Ginny, obviously, and now I have Keyleth and Anna as well.
Awesome. And I did see your Anna, so yay for Anna. She is one of my favorite, like of like the modern day princesses from Disney. Her and Rapunzel. I love them both.
Those are also my two favorites. I'm probably will try to do Rapunzel at some point because Tangled is actually my favorite Disney movie at this point. But I do really love Anna, and honestly, Anna was probably the most fun I've ever. Actually, any of the times I've worn it a couple times, is the most fun I've ever had in a cosplay because of the kids. If money was no object and I could, stay appearing to be in my early to mid 20s because I look younger than I am, if I could stay that age forever and I didn't have to actually make money, I would just go be a Disney princess at the parks. Like, that is just what I would do. I actually auditioned once just kind of to say I'd done it. But that would be my dream job, just interacting with kids as a Disney princess. So wearing Anna is kind of the same type of vibe. I spent a lot of time taking pictures with kids. I spent a lot of time interacting with kids, and it's just super fun. It's also the only time I've really ever been in character cosplaying, because normally I don't really do that. It's not LARP, it's cosplay, so you don't really feel the need to be in character. But if I'm dressed as Anna and a little kid comes up to me, you better believe I'm gonna be talking to that kid as if I am Anna. So that's probably the most fun I have in any of my costumes. I love that one.
That's so cool. I love Anna. I just there's just between Kristen Bell's voice,
Yep.
which is great, and then just the character and the attitude that she brings. I fell in love, and it's
Yeah.
I'm excited. I personally am excited for the Frozen 2 sequel, just to see what mischief she gets up to this time.
I am so excited.
And that is coming from someone who is turning 40 this year. So. But I have kids. It's okay.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, I have no kids. I don't have an excuse.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
So we've got your new or resurged love of role playing, and that has struck and brought you back into cosplay. Is there anything else that's going on that you're like, hey, people should check this out, or something new that you've gotten into, or you just go with what you got?
Yeah, it's been a lot of kind of not so much anything new, but the theme of the last kind of 6 months or so has really been kind of refinding things. New York, was great. As I've mentioned, it was a great couple of years, and I loved my job and I loved what I was doing. But there was a lot of things going on, and there wasn't a lot of time to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do a very good job of taking time for myself, and I didn't have a lot of space to do anything either. Because I had so many roommates and whatnot. So since I've moved back, it's been a lot of kind of rediscovering, why I loved doing the things that I was doing. So why I really love crafting and sewing and working on those things, whether I'm making costumes or I'm just making other little pieces and stuff. That's been really fun to get back into. Rediscovering tabletop gaming after even longer has been really fun. So yeah, it's been a lot more of kind of redeveloping the love for things that I have done before rather than jumping into anything new per se.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Now, for those people who have listened to this podcast, and thank you so much for listening and getting to the end with us, where can people find you on the great wide world of the internet if they'd like to follow either your exploits of Dungeons and Dragons or role playing or cosplay?
Instagram and Twitter are probably the best options. I post more of my own stuff on Instagram. Most of my Twitter is retweeting things. and
It's just so easy to hit that retweet
other
button.
people, yeah. I'm a theatrephile on both of them, and most of my stuff is not cosplay based right now. If you're primarily looking for cosplay photos, you're either gonna have to scroll way back on my Instagram, or as I complete new things and go to a couple of conventions, I might have some photos, but most of it is just kind of my day-to-day life and the silly adventures that I have and pictures of my ever-growing dice hoard. And then on Twitter, I talk. When I do post my own stuff, I do talk a lot about D&D and Critical Role and what all I'm up to. I will say, and I've said this specifically because it's also pinned to the top of my Twitter. My Twitter is not Game of Thrones spoiler free. So if you are not caught up on Game of Thrones, maybe wait until after the season's over before you go follow me. Because I do post about spoilers for that show. But those would be the two places to find me if anyone's interested.
Awesome. And I'll have that in our show notes, along with a link to episode 25 to take it back to the almost 3-year mark of having Caitlin on the first time.
Can't believe it's been 3 years. That's crazy.
I cannot believe it either. It's June 6th will be the 3-year anniversary of the podcast. And it's just, I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah.
But yet here we are. Here we are. Well, Caitlin, I want to say thank you for coming back and hanging out with me for the day that we are recording, which is on the 23rd of April. But, that's not important for people that are listening for when we recorded. But I do want to say thank you for your time and having, working out the issues that we had this morning. And you are always welcome to come back anytime. The offer is always open. I just we'll talk about something else, or talk about more Critical Role, or when the Critical Role TV show comes out, I will be like, hey, let's talk about it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I will absolutely take you up on that.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.